All right, welcome to another episode of An Anarchist Conversation. We're live on YouTube today. You can find us on iTunes if you want to subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. Facebook, Libsyn, and you can call in today at 732-685-4448. So call in if you want to get in on the conversation. Just got a little phone here, basically, and I'll put it on speaker. And we can have a conversation if you want to join in. But basically, today I want to talk about a critique of the liberty movement. I just read it's by Jim Limber Davis. Basically, I was kind of gonna go this route with the podcast today anyway, and kind of get into the basics of maybe calling it objective anarchist perspective. I'm not really sure what to label it, but something along those lines. Anyway, basically this Jim posted this critique just this morning, and I was like, yeah, this basically goes right along with what I wanted to do, which was getting to the basics of things. And basically what he's saying, he's kind of challenging those of us that speak out for liberty to know what we support, to know how it works, and to be able to explain it and do so. So we got to know and understand what we're talking about, and we have to be able to explain it, and we actually have to do so. Like when you're in discussions with people, don't just go, oh, well, that's the way it is because that's the way it is, or something's inherent, or I think he used the word axiomatic as well. Yeah, stay away from those words. Why not try to actually just, full on explain something and actually prove why it's inherent instead of just saying that it is. You know what I mean? So yeah, I was gonna just start off part of this episode talking about New Jersey's got a proposed bill coming our way, which is pretty crazy, and I was gonna just talk about force versus violence and things like that. And then he posted this critique, and I was like, this fits in perfectly, because when I do go down that route of explaining the basics of what I see and how I try to process it in my brain, I go down the route of using the terms force and violence, and I try to explain the differences between these two things. And that's kind of what part of Jim's critique points out. He says, if you want to be able to multiply, you need to be able to know how to add and subtract. If you want to know how to add and subtract, you need to know how to count. You need to know your numbers. So that's basically what he's getting at here. If we're going to talk about liberty, let's know what we're talking about. And yeah, so far in this podcast, I haven't delved into it too deeply. You might see some things I post on the Facebook page or something that'll kind of get towards it, pointing towards some philosophical stances and perspectives. But yeah, for the most part, I haven't dove into it really deeply in the podcast. Steve and I used to do that a lot in the past when we first started and only had a YouTube channel. We would dive into that a lot, and actually I'm bringing him on. He's going to come in person, so there'll be two of us on the screen sitting here in the room, both of us on the podcast, I think next week. So he'll be kind of adding to this conversation and kind of picking up where I'm leaving off. But why don't I start laying the foundation, the building blocks now? And one thing Jim points out in his critique was basically, specifically, the principle of self-ownership, which lots of people point to. Libertarians will point to that. Anarchists, voluntarists, agorists, but lots of different people point to that. So we need to be able to explain it, and I actually basically just take the word itself, self-ownership, and what would be the self? I'd say consciousness, basically. It's not really exactly a physical thing, a tangible thing that you can hold on to or something, but what is the self? The self is consciousness, and as far as humans, well, all right, before I go there, ownership, basic way of saying that would be something that's in possession of someone or something else, or solely controlled by someone, something else. You know what I mean? Um, so with those two kind of definitions and understandings of, the word self and ownership, um, like apply that to what we see on a daily basis. Is that true? You know, um, you'll hear parents oftentimes, they're raising their kids. Oh, you're responsible for your actions and no one else. Why do they say that? You know what I mean? And can anyone else actually control or possess your body? Can they manipulate you? Can they coerce you? Sure, sure. But at the end of the day, can they actually have that full control over your body? Like, that's what your consciousness has. Your consciousness, I'm pointing to my head because to me that makes sense, the brain, consciousness, maybe the heart's involved, the soul, whatever. But consciousness controls your body. You are your consciousness. And so for me, that's kind of where I go to when I want to explain the principle of self-ownership. No one else can make you raise your right hand like through you. You know what I mean? That happens internally. They can poke and prod and force you to do it externally, but only you yourself can do it internally. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a basic explanation of self-ownership as far as I'm concerned. And I want you all, like, go to the Facebook page if you can, an Anarchist conversation page, and check it out. I posted the entire critique of the Liberty Movement. I think it's interesting. Certainly check it out if you can. So anyway, I'm going to move on to basically what I was going to do. I was going to pull a few more things out, but I think I'm just going to now move on and talk about this proposed bill in New Jersey and basically apply what we were just talking about here to that. So basically, New Jersey is proposing a bill. A couple senators, assemblymen, whatever, are proposing a bill in New Jersey to basically give cops the ability to pull you over for eating, drinking, grooming, reading, or using electronic devices. Basically, they want to preemptively cut down on distracted driving, and I said preemptively specifically because as it sits right now, they have plenty of laws to actually deal with or pull someone over for actually driving poorly. For instance, reckless driving, careless driving, things like that. So, like, say you're driving your car and you're distracted, you actually can't handle what you're doing. But this goes to the point of, oh, well, I just saw that dude pop a little Munchkin's donut in his mouth while he's driving. It's illegal to eat and drive, so I'm going to pull this guy over, and now I can fish by asking questions of him. I can escalate the situation. Now I can get into his vehicle, basically. So that's what I see that as. Basically, it's just an overreach, an unnecessary reason to just give cops the ability to stop just about anyone for any little reason they can find. And of course, they can never do it. Like, at what point do they say you just can't use an electronic device such as maybe a vaporizer or, an iPad or iPod? I'm changing my music. You know what I mean? If those things are distracting, how could a passenger having a discussion with me not be at the very least potentially distracting? So it's just, they draw arbitrary lines. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, what about, changing the radio in your own car? Are you distracted for a few seconds while you do that? Yep. I mean, if you want to be objective about it, I would say so, but can you handle it? You know what I mean? Can you change the radio and still drive? People seem to handle it just about every day and have been for decades. People have been eating and drinking for decades. Does that happen? Does that mean people don't get in accidents? No. People get in accidents. Might it be because they were grooming their hair? Yeah, sure. probably shouldn't be doing that. It's kind of dumb. If you can't handle eating and driving, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. If you can't handle it, yeah, bad idea. Anyway, violators could get a $200 to $400 fine on their first offense. So if you pop a munchkin in your mouth, you could be, giving them up to $400. Second offense, $400 to $600. Third offense, $600 to $800 plus 90 days. Potentially, these are your max fines. 90 days for reading and driving. Anyway, so there's a million ways for them to deal with this already. It seems like a useless law, but how can we apply what I was talking about before with force and violence to this whole situation? Basically, force and violence, on top of self-ownership, would be another building block of understanding. Honestly, you could pretty much go to any dictionary, I believe, and look up the definitions of force, and you're going to find a lot of positives and negatives in connotation as far as the definitions go. Some will be talking about forcing someone to do something. Others will be talking about the force needed to do something. So that's where I'm at with that, and that's what I'm trying to explain here. Force is literally every human action. Me speaking right now is force. It requires force. That might sound like I'm getting mixing science in with definitions to try to make it sound my way, but seriously, I want to challenge anyone who is listening. Check out definitions of the word force and really think about it. It really just is everything that we do. Now, so oddly enough, yeah, there's a lot of people that in the liberty movement often will say, basically only use the word force in a negative connotation, and it's often proponents or people that cite the NAP. I usually do not actually cite the non-aggression principle. Not that I think it's wrong, but I don't think it's maybe complete, comprehensive. Maybe it's a little too ambiguous. But anyway, a lot of times people who cite the NAP always use the word force in a negative connotation. The initiation of force is wrong. Well, swinging a baseball bat and hitting a ball is force. Someone initiated that. Is it wrong? No, that is force. Someone speaking on a soapbox on a street corner is initiating force by speaking for everyone to hear. That is not wrong. So this is one of those things that might go back to what Jim was saying, and that people in the liberty movement need to understand and be able to explain the basic concepts of what they support and what they're telling other people that they should support and follow. Now, I've spoken a good bit about force here. What about violence? Violence would be when force goes... all right. Violence would be when force crosses the line into violating another person's rights. Rights would stem from self-ownership. So the easiest rights to, point out, I own myself, so it's my right to freely determine my path or destiny or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? Not that you get results, but you get to determine what path you take. You don't have a right to a certain result. You know what I mean? You don't have the right to be rich. You don't have the right to be poor. Not that anybody wants to be, but you know what I'm saying? So rape would be a violation because you own yourself, and if someone raped you, obviously you didn't consent to it. So that would be a violation of your right. If you consented to it, then yeah, obviously we're not talking about rape. I would even go as far as to say that lying itself is a form of violence, and some people might not like to hear this one, but what you're doing is actually stealing the ability of whoever you're lying to self-determine. You're stealing knowledge. You're basically not allowing them to make a fully understood decision and assessment about the situation. So yeah, even lying would fall under the category of violence. Um, so yeah, if and I've heard it explained before. I believe it was by Mark Pazio. He explained basically every violation can be boiled down to theft in some way, shape, or form. You're stealing self-ownership, basically, in some way, shape, or form. Even if you steal money from someone, that money was created through the fact that the other human being owned themselves and did something with themselves to generate that. You know what I mean? So it always goes back to self-ownership and theft of it in some way, like some way, shape, or form. There's going to be different words and different paths to get back to it, but it always goes back to that. So yeah, basically, I mean, that's how we need to, how I would say we need to assess every situation if we want to talk about why this is right and this is wrong, or why we support this or why we don't support that. I think the basic building blocks there are going to be self-ownership and the differentiation between force and violence. Would incorporating knowledge about the free market, economics, things like that also help? Yeah, absolutely. I think, but I think that's like a second layer. I think primarily we need to understand the basics of human interaction. We need to understand how to count in human interaction, and that's basically counting, self-ownership, force versus violence, and then maybe the addition and subtraction would be like a greater market, economic understanding, and then the multiplication and division might be like a society actually thriving around that understanding. But I really do think that these are the basic building blocks of what we should all be focusing on, understanding, and discussing with people that not only agree with us but disagree with us. That that should be the forefront message. Basically, why we own ourselves. Explain that. The self is consciousness. The self and consciousness possess and solely control. That's ownership. The body. So the body is self-owned. And then force. Every human action is force, and when it violates another person's rights, it becomes violence. So yeah, it's been fun. I'm not gonna keep beating a dead horse, but yeah, subscribe on iTunes if you are into iTunes. I'm on YouTube right now, live. I have a channel there. It's an Anarchist Conversation, of course. Facebook, an Anarchist Conversation. Libsyn, an Anarchist Conversation. And yeah, if you ever want to call in, 732-685-4448. Still haven't gotten a call, but I'm still getting things going, so I'm sure a lot of you still have to catch on. I usually do a Sunday podcast at 11 a.m., and that's probably that's really like my time to have people call in, if people were to call in, because I want to set a schedule so you guys know when and blah, blah, blah. But I've made some progress in my technology, figuring out how to do live video interviews. So I'm hoping to get that going, if not this week, next week. Basically, I just have to figure out how to record the audio, and then I'm good to go. So, anyway, I will catch you all next time. It's been fun. Thank you for tuning into an Anarchist Conversation. I'll catch you next week.